Every time we get ready to start the show, there's one technical difficulty after the other. But anyway, greetings and welcome to another edition of the Red Pill Diaries. I'm your host, Rashid, and let me go right into it. I got to bring in our returning guest, my guy right here, Larry Johnson.
Hey, Rashid.
There we go. How's it going today?
Good, man. I'm here.
Oh man, there's so much going on, Larry. First of all, I want to veer off somewhere because everybody and we will join this crowd, but everybody talks about what's going on in Ukraine and what's going on in the Asia Pacific. But I was told a few days ago that when Israel bombed Syria, they and they killed a high Iranian military official that they sent information through back channels that they did not mean for them to like take out the Iranian officials because they didn't know that the Iranian official was in that spot when they bombed because they feared escalation. Do you know anything about that?
I'm sorry, I don't. It sounds plausible because what's happening to Israel now in the Middle East is it's becoming increasingly isolated, more so than at any time, probably in the last 70 years or 75 years since it came into existence. The reason for that is the United States' efforts to go after Iran, to isolate Iran, have completely fallen apart. And that part of that effort was the war in Syria, the civil war that the United States and the British helped create and fund and arm and sustain, and then also the war in Yemen. Both of those now are coming to an end. In fact, the pictures are out today of the Saudi foreign minister meeting with Bashar Assad in Damascus. In the past, 10 years ago, it was the Saudis who were arming, funding the Islamic extremists that were attacking the government of Bashar Assad. So this really is a fundamental change, and the same with what's going on in Yemen. So when you look at it, because in Yemen with the Saudis and the Iranians reestablishing relationships, they both now work to disengage and stop that war. Well, the CIA was helping fund that as well. So the Israelis are not stupid, and they're looking around, recognizing, the neighborhood's changing, and we can't count on the United States to back us, to defend us. So we better look for some ways to learn how to get along with people. Is the simplest answer.
Well, with that said, what is the third part of Syria going to look like in the coming months to years with the detente between Iran and Saudi Arabia, Syria being brought back into the Arab League, and nations are now opening up embassies against the U.S.'s wishes, I might add, and also on the back end of that, what are those areas in Yemen that the British, the U.S., and the Israelis occupy? What is that going to look like?
Yeah, well, starting off in Yemen, excuse me, U.S. influence there is going to become virtually nil. There's nothing that the United States really needs, and frankly, there's nothing that the Yemenis want from us. So I see the United States, being disengaged from that region, that particular country. Up in Syria, it does get a little bit more complex. So you've got Russia and China working from two separate ends. Russia is working with the Turks to get the Turks and the Syrians reconciled. Because I'm sure you recall, when the civil war started in Syria, it was both the Gulf Arabs and Turkey that were playing a major role in funding the Arabs and working or the Islamic extremist groups and working to overthrow Bashar Assad. So, in fact, if you remember the whole Benghazi affair, 3 days before the attack in Benghazi, David Petraeus, who was then CIA director, showed up at a meeting in Istanbul or in Ankara with the government of Turkey. And basically, he was carrying a message that because of the upcoming election and Barack Obama's political concerns, the United States was going to hold back, draw down, take a lower profile with respect to weapons deliveries. And then that same message was delivered a few days later by Ambassador Chris Stevens in Benghazi at the consulate. So, Turkey's been up to its eyeballs in this thing for well over 11 years. Now that that's coming to an end, when you get Turkey reconciling with Syria, sitting down, because part of the reason I think Turkey got involved with this, they had their eyes on Syrian territory that they wanted to occupy and take, and then that hasn't turned out too well. The big losers in this are the Kurds. The Kurds have always been trying to find, they get no respect from anybody. They've carved out sort of a little area up in their, I guess, the northeast portion of Syria. But it remains to be seen, what's going to happen to them. That's the one sort of factor in this whole dynamic that hasn't been settled or dealt with yet.
And that's what I'm saying. The Kurds want, because they have offended the Syrian government so much, and the backdoor deals and all of this corruption that's going on for them selling the oil and the gas and the wheat and the corn, they have hell to pay as America is forced out of that area of Syria, right?
Well, and one of the key things that I think there's a strong case to be made that one of the major objectives of the U.S. war intervention in Iraq now 20 years ago was to ensure Israel's access to oil. And I think, again, with the changes that are taking place, you're going to see that dry up. I expect, fully anticipate, you'll see a stronger relationship going forward between Iran and Iraq, former enemies. I mean, they have a lot of history between them. But the ability of the United States to stir the pot and pit one group against the other in a very cynical way, it's really, the more I step back and look at it, our history, particularly over the last 30 years, it's disgraceful, and it needs to stop. The United States is like an alcoholic out of control. We can't help ourselves. We just, we're gonna mess up any country. We've got to the stage now that if a country that is supposedly our friend and our ally, if they don't do what we want, we're beating them up. I mean, we're like an abusive spouse. We're beating up the wife, we're beating the kids, we're fighting with the neighbors. You gotta lock us up, man.
Well, the Iranian government said that the days of the days of the U.S. hegemonic reign are now coming to an end, and the United States is a shell of itself. And this is what came out this morning. This is a headline on Sputnik News from a German lawmaker, and it says, the proxy war with Russia brings West hegemony to brink of collapse. So everybody is starting to recognize this, but why are they continually going forward, doubling and tripling and quadrupling down on failed policy, following in the footsteps of a broken hegemonic power? Because they can say these things, but they continue to walk right along the same pathway with America as her power is declining, and as friendships get broken up, and as nations rise and challenge the unipolar world. Why are they continuing to follow in the footsteps, even recognizing that the days of hegemonic rule is over?
Well, it's, again, I'll draw the parallel with somebody who's addicted to drugs or addicted to alcohol. the first step in the process of recovery is coming to recognize, hey, I got a problem and I need help. But just because you say, hey, I have a problem, I need help, doesn't mean that you completely disengage and separate yourself from what's been destroying you. And that is exactly what is going on with these European countries. This change is so rapid, so sudden. It's really catching everybody's unawares. If you would have, a year ago, if you would have asked me to predict, say, by April of 2023, will the Saudis have told the United States to pound sand? Will the Saudis have reached out to Iran and restored relationships? Will the Saudis decide that they're going to restore relations with Bashar Assad in Syria? I was a man. What are you drinking or smoking? What's going on? But that's what's happened. And in tandem with that, there's also the economic changes that were really ignited by the imposition of sanctions by the United States and the European countries on Russia. And it started with, they said, okay, you don't get to use SWIFT anymore. Well, SWIFT is, as you know, is a system for an email messaging system for banks for moving money from one financial institution to another. And it's like having your email account suspended. Well, what do you do if if Google, Gmail to suspend your email account? You go out and get another. And that's exactly what Russia has done. Russia has gone out working with China to recreate an alternative financial system not dependent upon the United States. And this thing has picked up momentum because it's not just Russia and China, it's India, it's South Africa, it's Brazil, it's Indonesia, it's Malaysia, Singapore's talking about. So it's more and more countries are jumping on board because they're sick and tired of the United States bullying and using financial leverage just because we've got the biggest checkbook. We think we can continually go around and beat people up. I mean, we're doing it right now to Hungary simply because we don't like their president, because he's not woke enough for us. Well, sorry. And so that kind of attitude on the part of the West is creating, it set in motion these forces economically. And then when you add on top of that, the most important thing that has happened in the last months, start this military operation. The union, the relations between, sorry, I froze up there for a minute. The restoration, or actually the creation for the first time ever in history, of a union between Russia and China.
Oh, yeah.
This is a diplomatic. It's diplomatic, it's economic, and it's military on all fronts. Never in the history of those two countries have they come together like this. Never. And we've never seen anything like this in the history of the world, where the dominant superpower, who has its key policy for the last 50 years, has been to keep those two separate. Never let them get together. It's like that scene from Ghostbusters. You had to keep Rick Moranis away from Dorney. Don't let those two get together. Well, that's been U.S. policy. And yet U.S. policy is now shredded. And Russia and China came together, expressing great friendship for one another. I don't know if you saw the film clip yesterday of that Chinese general, the defense minister in Moscow, walks up in the main hall to greet Vladimir Putin. Putin comes walking forward with his hand out to shake, and that general snaps to attention and salutes, and then they shake hands. Well, that was a sign of great respect. That was a symbolic gesture as well. That was sending a clear message. So with all this taking place, the United States is becoming increasingly isolated. So we've still got the illusion of power, but we're in that transition, like the great and powerful Oz. As long as people believe Oz was this big, majestic, magical figure, boy, they feared him. They wouldn't do anything to cross him. But then all of a sudden, boom, you pull back the curtain. The dog pulls back the curtain, and there's this little old man, an itinerant preacher. You know,
Yeah.
that's what the United States is becoming. Because look at Joe Biden. It doesn't get any older and crazier than that. I mean, good Lord.
Yeah, he's just a body. Nothing else exists. That's just a body in a suit. That's all. But speaking on Z, Z's top general, the defense minister going to China. Actually, I want to talk about Sudan because it has a lot to do with Russia too. But since you brought up that he spoke about the letter that was sent to Putin from Xi Jinping, and he was talking about they have unprecedented working relationship, and that they're going to strive to build even stronger relationships in every field. And I have never known a time where Russia had generals in the Chinese command center and the Chinese has generals in the Russian command center. And the United States keeps poking both of these powers.
Yeah. I mean, it's insane. Look, have you heard anybody in this country that's in leadership position talk about the need to have cordial relations with China and Russia? No. Everybody's describing them as our enemy. They're our enemy, not our adversary, our enemy. And by virtue of defining them as, we keep calling them our enemy, and that we got to take military action against them. Well, if you're the Chinese and the Russians, you're hearing that, that's like you're living in your let's say you're in your neighborhood, and you keep hearing your neighbor next door holler about, man, I'm going to kill you. You don't go, oh, that's just crazy Bob. What's he no, you go, okay, first I'm going to call the police, then I'm going to get a temporary restraining order. Then I'm going to go out and get some firearms and keep my eye on that guy. You're going to react. Why in the world do we think we can say these things about China and Russia and they're not going to react? They are reacting. And this reaction of China and Russia joining forces, China watched. Part of the impetus for this was what the West was trying to do to Russia in the wake of the start of the special military operation. China was watching that, and they realized, you know what? These cats are coming for me next. Once they get done with Russia, they're coming for me. So I better go back up Russia and we'll work together. And that's exactly what's happened. And this nonsense is coming out of Western media reports that, intelligence officials believe China is going to supply weapons to Russia. Russia doesn't need their weapons. Right. Russia produces plenty on its own. What China needs are the hypersonic missiles that are proven. China has developed at least one hypersonic missile, but it hasn't been tested in combat. It hasn't actually been used to blow stuff up. Russia has 3 varieties, and those are available now to China. China is going to get access to them, and with those, China will be a fortress that America cannot penetrate. Those missiles will take out our aircraft carriers, and our fleet of naval ships have no defense against the hypersonic missiles. So that's another sort of behind the scenes agreement, I'm sure, has taken place between China and Russia.
Before we go to Sudan, see, you bring up so many points, so many good points. Isn't that if this is the case and they continue to sanction and push Russia and China together, and we're looking at America trying to pivot to Asia to try to confront China, isn't this suicidal? And shouldn't the leadership be removed for insane policies that can endanger the lives of tens of thousands of U.S. sailors, airmen, Marines, and and Army troops?
Well, without divulging the source, I am friends with someone who has friends with someone indirectly who's one of the commanders in Indo-PACOM. He is not the top guy. And I know that he has expressed grave concern about the commander of Indo-PACOM trying to get us into a war. And you have subordinates under him trying to stop him. So it is, it's a very dangerous time, and the misinformation that's out there. I did a conversation the other day with a fellow named Jason Goodman. He does a show called Crowdsourcing the Truth, and Jason is a well-read guy. I mean, he was a filmmaker, and he's done a lot. So he's not like he's just been pulled out of the wilds of the Northwest and where he was living in a cave. And when I started explaining the one China policy that Richard Nixon agreed to back in 1972, Nixon said, okay, yes, the United States accepts China as it was one entity, and that Taiwan is a province of China. Therefore, Taiwan is a part of China. That's been U.S. policy up until last year. We're now the Biden administration, with the backing of members of Congress, both Republicans and Democrats, are rejecting that. We're trying to treat Taiwan as an independent country, as one that has no connection whatsoever to China. Well, I keep using this analogy, but I think it's appropriate. Taiwan is to China as Hawaii is to the United States. In other words, Taiwan is a province of China. Province is another word for state. Hawaii is a state of the United States. It's not connected to us, the mainland. It's a 4-hour flight, I guess, from Los Angeles. But if China started interfering in Hawaii, and China tried to establish unilateral military relations with the National Guard of Hawaii, do you think we'd be concerned? Of course. We'd be outraged. Yet we think we can go do that same thing to China, and that they're supposed to just, bend over and take it? No, that's not how this works. And so part of what's driving that is I would just say the ignorance of the American public at large. Because when I brought this up to Jason, he was what? He did not know. He had been fooled by the propaganda that has been dumped on the American people for many years, trying to paint a picture of Taiwan as an independent state, something completely separate from us. And so that ignorance is dangerous.
But I've heard the president's administration refer to something like independent Taiwan. We've just recently heard Lindsey Graham saying that he would support the U.S. military incursion into Taiwan and the defense of Taiwan. And we've just heard a few other congressmen and senators on Fox News and stuff, all saying that they would support intervening and fighting and to keep China from taking or invading Taiwan. And my mind is like, as they're saying, I'm saying, invading, your policy recognizes Taiwan as an integral part of the one China. So how can China invade itself? And why is this willful ignorance, or is this are these top leaders like that? We know they're on the payroll, but is there something behind the scenes that they're adhering to promote this foolishness that Taiwan is a separate policy, separate part from China? Because even the average person should know that it is called Chinese Taipei or the Republic of China.
Yeah, no, you raise a really good point about how can these people who, Lindsey Graham is not an uneducated man. He's not someone without experience, but what he says is absolutely batshit crazy. You know, it's just it's so totally divorced from reality. And I think he genuinely believes the nonsense that he's saying. He has constructed a worldview. He's constructed a worldview that is divorced from reality, but he's clinging to it. I think really what's going to happen in Taiwan, where we got all this build up. Oh yeah, we're going to sell them military equipment. We're going to do this, that. At the next election, which I think is within a year, the majority of the voters on Taiwan are going to vote to restore full relations with China, with the mainland. And then all of a sudden, we're going to be looking around and go, what? Well, wait, we told you to stand. We'll stand with you. Nobody's going to. No, after the collapse that's coming in Ukraine, nobody's going to trust us because they realize we are not as strong militarily as we pretend to be. Number one. Number two, we have nothing but a total self-interest. So we don't care a damn about these other countries. As long as it benefits us, we're on board. And as soon as we decide it doesn't benefit us, baby, we're out. We're heading to someplace else.
Well, they say that China is a threat, and I'm going to say this and let you respond. Then I want to ask you something about the Sudanese crisis that's going on. Yeah. But they say that China is a threat, quote unquote, to Taiwan, to invade Taiwan, and yet the United States openly says that we will burn down and destroy the chip industry and all of the vital industries of Taiwan before we allow China to take it. I mean, the insanity of this. What do you have to say about this? Because this is total madness.
Yeah, no, it's just it goes back to Vietnam days where we got to destroy the village in order to save it. Well, when you're destroying that thing which you claim to be saving, you don't understand what the concept of salvation is. Yeah. Salvation is to maintain whole and intact. And the chip industry is, I think, the primary motivation for the United States in this. China can really hurt the United States significantly on the economic front. And there are already signs that its patience is exhausted. And so, for example, they've said, okay, we're going to stop exporting rare earth minerals to the United States. But those rare earth minerals are essential, critical for electric vehicles, for example. So no rare earth minerals, no electric vehicles, and the EPA declaration that we're going to get rid of all gas-fired automobiles and everybody has to drive an electric car. Well, that's gonna blow up in their face. The Chinese just announced that none of the executives from Raytheon, Lockheed Martin can ever come to China, or they'll be arrested. They are refusing to provide any export materials to Lockheed Martin and to Raytheon. So again, that has implications for the U.S. defense industry, and China hasn't even started. We keep treating China like it's some obnoxious little kid that we can, we have to deal with, but don't have to take seriously. Chinese they're not playing anymore. They are fed up. They don't get mad and start crying and throwing a fit. They stay sort of quiet, but talking through clenched teeth. They're a little bit more like Clint Eastwood in his old spaghetti westerns, just yeah.
Well, what is going on with the Sudanese issue with the special forces trying to take over, and then the regular military at odds with each other? Someone told me that the United States is playing a major part of that and there was a visit by a key U.S. official a few days before the rebellion of the what is it, the special military force rebelled against the main part of the army. Do you have any information on what is actually going down on the ground there, and why is it taking place?
Well, let me start by asking, do you believe in coincidence?
Nope.
Yeah, me neither. So a couple of months ago, Russia signed an agreement with Sudan to open a naval facility, a naval base on the Red Sea. And now here we are, a month, 2 months later, where this paramilitary, it's really a paramilitary group. It's not part of the army. And I will, bet you, a Ferrari that the CIA was involved in training, equipping, and backing that particular force. And now that military force has launched effectively a coup to try to oust the existing government. And the existing government is fighting back. And so it's really up in the air who is going to prevail. I mean, the reports are across the board that the rebel forces are winning, the government forces are winning. So it's going to take a few days to sort out what the outcome is. But what is certain is that the United States played a role behind the scenes in stirring this up. Again, look at what has happened over the last 2-3 years. You had the coup attempt last year in Kazakhstan. Mm-hmm. Before that, you had a coup attempt in Belarus. Who's behind that? We are, the United States. So you had this protest that surged in the streets of Georgia, the country of Georgia, over the legislature wanted to pass a law limiting foreign interference, and the people were outraged about that. We want more foreign interference. Yeah. I mean, so the United States is really a malevolent force in the world. And yet we are inundated with propaganda to convince us that the real imperialists, the real threats to the world peace are China and Russia. They're hell-bent on taking over the world. So when I ever hear somebody say that, I said, really, give me the list of countries that China has invaded since 1975. Let's go back almost 50 years. Well, the answer is one. And that country was Vietnam in 1979. And the reason China invaded, because Vietnam was invading Cambodia. So China went to try to assist Cambodia, and China got its butt kicked. It didn't do too well. So how about Russia? Let's do the list of how many countries Russia's invaded. Well, you can call Georgia an invasion, except the Russians were attacked. Russian forces were attacked. They responded. And then you've got Ukraine. But again, as long as you start the clock from February 24th of 2022 and ignore the civil war that had taken place with the backing of the United States and the United Kingdom, which were virtually attacks on people that were aligned with Russia, it's not an unjustified act on the part of Russia. Those are two. So what's the one country in the world that's carried out more expeditionary military actions in other countries, killing literally millions of foreigners when you add them all up? That would be the United States of America. When you start with Vietnam and then go on to the wars in Central America, invasion of Panama, invasion of Grenada, invasion of Dominican Republic. Man, we always had a good reason. It was we're protecting democracy. Remember, we're here to save the people. Vietnam left.
Even Grenada.
Hundreds of thousands. Then we get Iraq. We've done Iraq twice. Afghanistan, Somalia. So, the list goes on. Serbia, let's not forget the war in Yugoslavia, former Yugoslavia. So at some point, people need to step back and go, who is the real threat to international peace?
Mm-hmm.
Who is the country that's got the defense budget that exceeds that of, if you take China's defense budget, Russia's defense budget, that of the United Kingdom, France, and Germany. Those 5 countries combined, the United States spends twice as much as all of those combined. Okay?
Yeah.
But it's China and Russia that are threatening the world. Sorry, I can read and I can remember. I may be old, but I don't have Alzheimer's yet. So what go ahead.
No, go ahead. I thought it was a pause on my screen. So go ahead, finish your thoughts.
No, so I said, so what we're seeing is really, it's that psychological condition of projection. We are projecting onto China and Russia the very thing which we are, and we refuse to acknowledge it and accept it. And I'm afraid, genuinely afraid, that the only way that we're going to snap out of this and come to our senses is we're going to do something stupid, like try to provoke a war with China, and we're going to get into a shooting match out there in the Pacific, and we're going to lose 1 or 2 carrier battle groups, and we're going to have tens of thousands of dead sailors. And then all of a sudden, America will have lost more personnel in one day than it did in 20 years of war in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Are there any adults on Capitol Hill on 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue to sit back and say, listen, everything that we do has been a excrement show, body waste show, and we continue to add more body waste on top of more body waste without thinking. Do they sit down and think of the ramifications of the insane policies? I'm going to sanction Russia. Just the other day, they sanctioned a couple entities in China. Now, for you to understand where I'm coming from, China is the largest investor in America. They're the largest trade partner. They're the largest manufacturer. And you sanction 2 or 3 corporations from China because you say that they are involved in trade with Russia.
Right.
First of all, isn't that extraterritorial or extrajudicial laws being imposed upon other nations with these sanctions? And secondly, do the policymakers realize that they're alienating their largest trade partner and the people who trade with the largest trading partner?
Now, they don't care. That's what's so crazy about this. I listened to an interview that Janet Yellen did, yesterday, day before yesterday on CNN. And she's Secretary of the Treasury now. That woman's delusional. I mean, she is not in touch with reality. Because she was talking about, how these economic sanctions that we've imposed upon Russia keeps them from acquiring military equipment. And, I wanted to grab her, shake her by the throat and say, sweetheart, do you not realize Russia builds its own stuff? They don't have to go to U.S. defense corporations to buy anything. In fact, they make more, they make better, and they make it cheaper. So, wake up if she's that disconnected from reality. And you see that same sort of delusional thinking across the board in Washington. Very few voices would speak out. Rand Paul has been one voice, but he's an isolated voice. And frankly, is treated as something of a crank, some like Weird Al Yankovic. He's there on the bench. The establishment, in both Republican and Democrat, are fully wedded to this insane policy. And anybody, like me or like you, that tries to speak up to say, no, this is wrong, we're immediately accused of being Russian agents or Chinese agents, or that we're under the control of foreign powers, or we don't know what we're talking about. And I've sort of reached the place where I'm so completely angry about this that I'm going to become more forceful in speaking out about it. But because the very life of this republic is at risk, and we are so fixated and wrongly fixated on what's going on outside of our country. And when I say wrongly fixated, we go through a lens that is distorted. And so we do not see the truth of what's happening outside, and we completely ignore what's transpiring within our own country. I saw the statistics that I think it was in Baltimore. They got, it was in, I think, like 15% of the kids that graduate, come out of middle school, can read. The other 75, 80% can't. We're doing that to children. And the lack of hope that is in tandem with lack of jobs. I've been beating this drum as well, just to do the contrast with what I grew up with and what exists now. When I grew up in Independence, Missouri, my father was a foreman at a steel plant, Armco Steel. It was first called Sheffield Steel. One of my buddies, his dad was a foreman at Standard Oil. Other friends' fathers were working the line on GM plants in Leeds and Fairfax there in Kansas City. Others were employed at Alice Chalmers, an agricultural implement. They made tractors and harvesters. Then there was the Bendix Corporation that, they also were a manufacturing outfit. So the point was that you could go get out of high school, not have to go to college, and you could make a decent paying job. I remember, we were middle class, a family of six. I got a brother and two sisters. Had to share one bathroom. So, you may know what that's like, now with your kids, they've probably grown up having at least two bathrooms in the house. Yeah. They can't even conceive having one, right. So, but we were able to take vacations every summer, and nothing spectacular, but go to Virginia from Missouri to visit the relatives and go to the beach, or go out to California, get in a car and go. Well, now what's happened? All of those businesses I just mentioned that were Armco Steel, the GM plant, Standard Oil, Bendix, Alice Chalmers, they're gone. They're gone. So these kids coming out of high school, what are they going to do? Go be a manager at a Dunkin' Donuts or at a Wendy's? I mean, I'm not going to be a manager at Wendy's, but it's just that you're not making anything that lasts. You're not making something that is going to actually add to the material wealth of this country. Independence is not an exception. It is typical. It's representative of something that's taken place across the country. Same thing in Baltimore, where the workers on the docks, that used to be a big place. They used to have a big steel plant going up there, and again, those jobs disappear. So with the disappearance of those jobs, there's no hope. And so when you've got a lot of parents, and particularly single parent households, it just sets up a cycle of internal destruction. So that's what's taking place here in America. And meanwhile, we're talking about the need. Oh yeah, we got to boost our defense spending, man. We got to ramp up. We got to get more weapons. But we can't find enough kids to join the military because 77% of them are either too fat, too ill, too drugged out, or too physically unfit that they couldn't meet the standards. But boy, we're going to take our budget from 850 to maybe 900, 950. We're going to have $1 trillion. At this rate, we're going to have $1 trillion military within 5 years. That is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. And and I think about sometimes when I'm doing the show, and I tell people that people don't realize that you are what you eat mentally as well as physically. And if all you eat is hopelessness, and all you eat is class warfare or being vilified or something, you're going to start living that, because science proves that environment has just as much impact on you as DNA. And and a lot of people disassociate that, and I continue to harp on this problem here because I believe it is the number one problem in America. The educational system is in disarray. If you don't have the proper education, you cannot mold and shape the proper students for future generations to be lawyers, doctors, scientists, brilliant men and women. So when you put the educational system last, and all you do is push sports and play and war, especially when a teacher can barely afford to pay bills and eat, and you have a basketball player dribbling the ball and he gets $300-400 million, the priorities of the country are in such disarray that we're living in the fall of America. This is the fall of America, and it seems like it is becoming more it's like becoming more detached from reality, because these people are so inebriated on the power and the influence and the wealth that America used to have and used to wield, that they continue to buck up against rising and reemerging powers like China and Russia. And then at the same time, they alienate their allies and enemies alike. I mean, how can a viable society continue on or be prosperous when you have gutted your manufacturing base, when you are vilifying different portions of your society, when you are creating class warfare and cultural warfare, and then at the same time you're dumbing down the educational system so that the few at the top can implement insane and lunatic policies, and they don't realize that if you dumb down your society, you are actually setting thermite to the base of the republic.
Yeah. No, it is. A lot of the changes are subtle in some ways. Example, not teaching kids to write in cursive is one example. We want them to keyboard. Well, you can teach a chicken to keyboard. Okay, just put the corn on the ABC, and the chicken will punch away. What people didn't understand that have advocated this is that action of learning how to write and the movements with your hand required actually wires your brain. It builds neural pathways, and there's some complexity in that promotes critical thinking. That's one of the reasons that people who learn to write in Russian Cyrillic or Chinese characters or Japanese characters or even in India with they're different with Sanskrit and other languages. Those are complex figures, and just the action of learning to write that builds these pathways in the brain, which means it's one of the reasons I believe that the students are better educated and more intelligent in places like China, Russia, Japan, particularly when it comes to the sciences and math. In the United States, we're creating this illusion that you can go to college and do gender studies. It's like, okay, here's gender studies for you. Take your clothes off and stand in front of the mirror before you take a shower, okay? Pay close attention. Look at what you got. That's called a gender study. If you can't identify by looking, you've got some other problem. It's all right. So
yeah, they've gone insane with that, and I have to say something about that too. They've gone and the madness has reached unheard of proportions, because when you don't accept the madness that is being imposed on society, you're vilified and you're looked at as though you're not progressive or you're not up with the times. But we know that there's only, and I have to say this, even if this gets a little suspension, there's two sexes, male and female. God made Adam and Eve. He didn't make all of this other stuff outside of that. Now, that may vilify me, but I'm a principled person, and I'm going to stick with my principles, even if that means that I get one subscriber instead of thousands of subscribers. But why do you think, again, since we're on this, why do you think that there's such a push in society for things that have no relevance whatsoever for the building and maintaining of a progressive, successful society? And when you lay these little frivolous, I would call them side points, and make them the main point, you're destroying your society. Why are they continuing to do that with this gender stuff and this madness that they continue to push?
Well, I think I had one of my readers at sonar21.com is a psychologist, and he sent me a note about mass delusion, and I asked him to write an article, and he did. And what we're witnessing, what has taken place, not just in the United States, but it's also rampant in Europe, is the psychological condition of mass delusion, where people have divorced themselves from reality on a whole spectrum of things. For example, climate change. Climate change is a mass delusion. We have convinced ourselves that there are elements, prominent voices, respected figures that go around and talk about the nonsense that human beings can actually change the climate. Even the very phrase climate change. Well, what's the opposite of climate change? Climate stasis? Climate that never changes? Well, of course we have climate change. It's called life. And anybody that does any study of the geology, the geological history of the world, there's been climate changes throughout. There have been cold periods. There have been hot periods. There have been glaciers that have covered continents that are now uncovered. And that wasn't because people were driving around in cars using fossil fuels, okay? So the science is so devoid, that the so-called science of that has really become like a religion. And anyone who dares to challenge it is immediately attacked and called a science denier, climate denier. Well, I don't deny climate. The climate exists. And what's so crazy about this, again, is the divorce from reality. We got this circling pool of plastic waste out in the Pacific. They say it's bigger than the state of Texas. Now, that's something that we as human beings could actually clean up in a coordinated effort. Go up and pick all that garbage up out of the ocean. Pick it up, clean it up. There's ways that we can make the environment around us better. I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, it was still the thing that you could throw trash out the car as you're driving down the road. You'd stop at McDonald's and toss the bag out. That used to be a thing. And then they said, oh, we're going to stop littering. Well, the campaign worked. But you've got the mass delusion on climate change. You've got the mass delusion on gender, that you're convinced that just because a guy says that he's a woman, that therefore we have to believe he's a woman. Well, the next evolution of this is somebody's going to say, hey, I'm a cantaloupe. So you got to treat me as a fruit, Just,
oh man!
I mean, it's, but then we get the similar kind of delusion with respect to what's going on in Ukraine. Oh, Vladimir Putin's a dictator. He's an authoritarian. He's running out of weapons. His economy is going to collapse. Ukraine is winning. It's all delusional. It's all divorced from reality. And yet that the consistent thing throughout this is the willingness to adopt beliefs that have nothing in common with what's actually happening. So the only thing that wakes you up is called reality. When it's like with Mike Tyson said, once you get punched in the face, you sort of get your senses about you. Hey, I'm in a fight.
Reef Omar says this LGBTQ plus AKA woke madness has destroyed the family and is attacking the natural order created by God Himself, the Most High.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. It's just we don't want to be in a situation where you're persecuting people. What two consenting adults, my view has always been, what two consenting adults do, that's their business. But that's not what we're talking about. We just had the UN the other day come out and basically advocate for sexual relations between adults and children. In other words, advocating for pedophilia. Yeah. They're writing that whole, we need to work to remove all these restrictions in their view. Well, hey, there's just some demonic influences out there in the world, and the victimization of children in this way and the sexualization of children. This is just sickening. And that has become a thing. The reality with respect to the promotion of a homosexual lifestyle and homosexual activity is it really is an attack upon heterosexual reproduction, which is essential for the survival of the species. So there is no species in the world that's a mammal that is homosexual, that predominantly homosexual, that survives as a species. None. So, it's just, but we've now gone to the opposite extreme on the spectrum. But hey, this is not new. There's that thing in the Old Testament about Lot, and Sodom and Gomorrah, they're writing about that, 1,000 years ago, more than 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, and that it was a thing back then. So this is, like I said, this is not necessarily new. It's just people fail to learn and remember.
They better remember the results of that, though. But that's the main thing that you remember, what happened because of that. But anyway, because not a blade of grass grows where Sodom and Gomorrah once stood. So that's how angry God was with this. But as I tell people, I'm not against your lifestyle, but don't put your lifestyle in my face. Don't tell me that everybody has a choice and then you take my choice away because I don't agree with your choice. What you do in your bedroom or in your home, that's your business. But don't blast it in my face. And when I say, hold up, this is not for me right here, I'm looked at as though I'm crazy. Don't do that to me. But Jenna BN says, same way as they tried to convince everyone about being jabbed, the experts say science, LOL. Yeah, I agree with you 100% on that. I agree with you 100%. Eddie says, let's see if it'll pop up. Mehdi says, Mr. Johnson is always one of my faves. So, and let's see. And then Mehdi says, he says the little statement that you said with Mike Tyson, everyone has plans until they get punched in the face. So, but now, who would have thought that Africa would lead the charge against this wokeness about this? Because nobody's talking about it. Is Africa that's leading the charge against this madness that is being posed upon the world. In a 10, 20 years, I wouldn't have thought that. But what do you have to say on that matter?
Well, again, when you look at the history of the last 300 years at least, the European countries, and then to a lesser extent the United States, have been exploiting these African countries. I mean, so many of the African countries were colonial outposts. the Portuguese had some, the Germans had some, the French had some, the British had a lot. And though the locals, the Africans of those different countries, lived under colonial rule and resented it. And they're always treated as second-class citizens. Now, the issue of slavery was both something internal to Africa, where there were Africans enslaving other Africans and Africans selling Africans to the Europeans, and the Europeans happily, buying them up and, again, treating them like property. The two countries that never treated Africa as a colonial outpost, as some place where they could come steal and take, a place for rape and plunder, China and Russia. And the local African countries recognize that. Plus, they're also religiously conservative, whether we're talking, the Christian faith or the Islamic faith. That a lot of these countries, they're conservatives. In fact, then look at what's going on in the West. The West is going crazy. I think it was the president of Angola, maybe it was Uganda the other day. So they're getting pressure from the West to, hey, you got to get on board with the LGBTQ agenda here. And he was going, we keep hearing from America that we got to be a democracy. Okay, we're a democracy. Our people, I was elected by my people. And our people don't want anything to do with this homosexual agenda. So therefore, you now want to punish us because we're following our democratic principles? You people can't make your mind up. I mean, he was so disgusted with the West. And you saw the similar reaction against the French with Macron when he went down for his visit in former French colonies. So it's like that scene for that movie Broadcast. Was it Broadcast News, or where at the end the newscaster says, "I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore." Well, that's what's going on here. Across the continent of Africa, people are throwing the window open and saying, "I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore." We're not going to be pushed around by the United States. We're not going to be threatened by the United States. We're going to go our own way and develop relationships with Russia, with China. That's accelerating, and that's what has sort of really people in Washington, D.C. becoming increasingly concerned. It's happened so quickly, they never counted on it.
Mm-hmm. Following up what you said about the UN, Real Truth Talk, which go subscribe to Real Truth Talk, says that pedophilia is next, but this is what they wanted. When you talked about what the UN was doing, and also let me go back. This thing is going so fast. Oh man, it's going so fast. And I know exactly this part of the scripture that he's talking about, and it says the part says, and God gave them over to a reprobate mind to do those things which were not seemly, because they did not keep God in their consciousness. That's what it's talking about. Right. So we see a lot of reprobateness because God is not at the center of what they do. And so everybody has become self-centered. And I believe that when you become self-centered and you remove the center of the universe, which is God, out of your thought and out of your actions and out of your heart, it's easy for you to be given over to those reprobate things, which to do, as the Bible says, things which are not seemly. And men have become lovers of themselves and all of this stuff. I understand. I hear exactly what he's saying on here. But let's go down. It says, oh, really? This is a question for you. It says, Mr. Johnson, if you can give me his email so he can get an interview with
you. Sure. It's lcjohnson1@me.com. lcjohnson1@me.com.
All right. And Reef Omar said, God, these things are going so fast. Oh, every time I'm
that's a good thing.
They're going up so fast. Yeah, yeah. And it says, let's see. Reef Omar says the U.S. is modern Sodom and Gomorrah on steroids, and the people living that lifestyle are very aggressive with encroaching into other people's spaces. You know, now that you say that is an apt way to describe this, because remember during Sodom and Gomorrah days that Lot was offering his children. He said, and they said, we don't want that. You know what we want. You know, the people were like, we want those people that you put in that house up in there. Those who we came, yeah. Those men, and not knowing that those men were angels or whatever like that. And this is what it is. They're imposing their views, their madness on the, and what the U.S. media does is amplify the madness. You know, and so I look at the media as in the Bible, the scribes, because the scribes was the media at the time, and they continue to push madness on people. And if you don't agree with the madness, then you are considered mad. What do you say about that?
Well, 40 years ago, Monty Python did a sketch about one of I think it was Eric Idle, one of the players. They were sitting in a Roman Colosseum, and he decided that he wanted to be called a woman. And it was complete. It was funny because it was so bizarre. And now that's become reality, where you have men who are men through chromosomes, through biology, through the physical attributes, and then they come out and want to be called women. I mean, I volunteer as a range safety officer at a local outdoor gun range, and one of the members, a guy named Dan, showed up, wanted to be called Danny, and had grown his hair out, had green fingernail polish on. I mean, we're calling him a big dude, and he's an ugly damn woman. I mean, it just. But he insists, and then he came down and wanted to talk to me about it, and he trying to find a nice way to say, dude, I'm not really interested in your dysfunction. You want to make a fool of yourself, be my guest, free country, but don't ask me to embrace or accept what this thing that you're doing. I am convinced that one of a couple of the reasons for this has to do with guys who want to become like their mothers. They have a bad relationship or no relationship with the father. They want to become like their mother. The other thing is the level of soy products that children are ingesting at young ages, which really carry a heavy estrogen level and can result in less testosterone in the male. So, I mean, these are some practical things that have happened in our diet that I don't think are just accidental in terms of promoting these kinds of weird, bizarre social, changes to society, where we're asked to accept transgenderism as normal. It's not normal. It's abnormal. And it needs to be called out as such. But we've got too many leaders and too many corporations afraid to do so.
And let me say, these are the opinions of Rashid and the chat and Larry. So please do not give us a strike. We're not advocating hate against one particular section of society. We're not advocating anything that's pertaining to violence against any society. I have to say this because the algorithm and YouTube will say that we are promoting something against a certain, and I'm tired of YouTube doing me like that. But it is what it is. And if I have to be the sacrificial lamb for it, I'm willing to do that. But Mehdi says our nation seems to be a schizophrenic narcissist to the rest of the world. We are a true reflection of our current leadership, unfortunately. What say you on that matter?
Yeah, no, it is. There was a time where America was really seen as a beacon. When Ronald Reagan talked about it being a city on a hill, he was quoting Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah, with respect to the city of Zion being a beacon to the world. And the example should be that, hey, we're wealthy because we give everybody a chance to succeed. We're wealthy because we have an educated population and we believe in the importance of educating children. We're wealthy because we have a system of justice that is colorblind. It's fair. It doesn't matter how much money you make or how poor you are, you're going to get treated the same way. We used to believe that, but what we've become and what we're seeing is that we have a system of justice that is as bad as anything in the third world, where if you've got enough money, you can get off. If you've got the right connections, you can get off. And if you've run afoul of the ruling authorities, you can be punished. A system in which there is zero concern for the fact that there are children not being educated and allowed to grow into adults who are uneducated. And it's not just within the Black community, it's in the white community, it's across the board. The communities where it doesn't take place are in the Asian communities, because those Asian parents, they're all over their kids. They're not going to let them be left out. But I've seen too many kids, both white and Black, that are not challenged, that are left to just sort of rot in the system. I mean, I've got several of my own family from some of my siblings that have just done a terrible job with raising their kids. And there's little you can do. I don't know if you've got any brothers or sisters. If you've ever tried to intervene in the lives of any of your nieces or nephews, that sometimes can get pretty messy. But we're seeing this across the board that the United States has become dysfunctional, and we don't recognize our own dysfunction. But one of these days, we're gonna wake up when we have to do something and find out we can't do it, and that will be the moment where we've sort of hit rock bottom, and maybe will inspire a desire to change.
Well, I just want to just maybe two questions, because you've been real patient. What is the situation on the Ukrainian battlefield, and give us the ins and outs of what you know, because you cannot trust anything on mainstream media, and you can't trust most things on alternative media.
Number one, the Ukrainian air defense system has been dismantled, destroyed by the Russians. So as a result of that, Russia is now able to use its fixed-wing aircraft with greater frequency. And in doing so, they're delivering these monster bombs, a 500 kilogram, 1,500 kilogram, and they even have a 3,000 kilogram. I mean, that's over 6,000 pounds. And
good Lord.
Yeah, it's going to leave a mark. And so across the battlefront extends about close to 700, 800 miles. And all along that, the Russians are attacking, and the Ukrainians are trying to defend. The problem the Ukrainians have is, A, they do not have the domestic ability to produce artillery shells. They're relying upon NATO and the United States for artillery shells, and the United States and NATO cannot provide them with the artillery shells they need and artillery pieces, the guns needed to fire those artillery shells. So the Russians are busily they're engaged in a war of attrition just to wear down the Ukrainians. We keep hearing talk that there's going to be a counteroffensive by Ukraine. If they decide to launch it, it's going to be a suicide attack on the part of the Ukrainians, and may very well could bring about an immediate end to the war, because there would be no army left for Ukraine to put on the field of battle. So despite the claims that Russia's losing and that Russia's in disarray, they're moving forward steadily. What they're not doing is putting their troops in a position where they're going to be subject to mass casualties. They are doing their tactics of, they're not fast. There's not a lightning war, but Russia's they're not on the clock. they don't have to be done in a certain period of time. And what the war footing has done to the Russian economy it's really re-energized it in a way that out of this they're gonna be in demand for their weapon systems to be bought in other countries because they will have been proven in combat. They will not be selling stuff that doesn't work, which has been one of the hallmarks of some of the U.S. weapon systems.
Before I post this, I want to go to something. I think the attack on Russia didn't start with Ukraine or Georgia. I believe that it was a strategic and in-depth, thought-out plan, and it started back with the bombing of Yugoslavia and the dismantling of Yugoslavia. And then I think it progressed with the assassination of Hafik Hariri. Because if you look at before they actually went head up with Russia in Ukraine, they start dismantling governments that were friends of Russia and that bought Russian weaponry from Syria to Libya, and all of these nations that America has been attacking. They bought weapons from Russia, and so it seems like to me that this was a strategic plan, and Ukraine just happens to be one cog in the engine of dismantling the Russian Federation. What have you to say about that? And then I'll come to this question that this guy that Mehdi puts up for you.
Yeah, this desire to take Russia apart started emerging after Putin cracked down on the oligarchs. And why was that? Well, the oligarchs were raping Russia, and they were doing so in tandem with, they had American partners and British partners. And so these wealthy Americans and wealthy Brits that were no longer going to get to dip their beak in the waters of Russia, they were upset. And so that the propaganda started turning against Putin, because Putin made a very, very clear declaration to NATO and to the United States. He says, "I'm not your bitch. You're not gonna do to me whatever you want. Sorry." He's just and on top of that, he was very strong advocate for the Eastern Orthodox Christian faith, and within that rejected the homosexual agenda, the LGBTQ agenda, and as such, that evoked great outrage in the part of the Western media, in the media, in Hollywood, and corporations where there are active LGBTQ folks. I think that has been another factor in this anger against Russia. And then the CIA started, and the British embarked on a propaganda campaign designed to paint Russia as, that Putin's out murdering his opponents and using chemical and radiological weapons around the world. Those I think are false claims. Those have been used, designed to smear Russia, to feed into this propaganda so that the West will believe that Russia is a threat, needs to be eliminated. Why they want to eliminate it? Because Russia is the most wealthy, resource-rich country in the world. And the United States and the West wants those resources. And Russia is not going to give them up. And that's sort of another factor of this. So the hatred of Putin and the hatred of Russia, it's irrational. It's not It's not like Putin was Pol Pot in Cambodia and lined up people by the millions and executed them. He hasn't done that. In fact, what's interesting is the accusation that Putin's been stealing from the Russian people. You go to Russia and look at the cities, what has happened. They were, as to quote Donald Trump, they were shitholes 20 years ago. Now they're gleaming, they're pristine, they're beautiful. They have functioning subways, system, transport system, airports that are the most modern in the world. You go to New York City, schools, and literally on the streets, and and so just this disconnect from reality. There's Putin. Putin was not stealing money for himself and ignoring his country. He has literally rebuilt Russia, and I think when the history of this period, the 25 years is written, Vladimir Putin will go down as one of the most consequential world leaders in history.
Yeah, I think so.
And that is, Americans say, so how can that be? Well, you look what he did for a country, and kept his country out of foreign wars until Russia was provoked to such an extent. Ukraine was getting ready to attack it with the backing of NATO when they launched the special military operation a year in February. That's part of the story that most Westerners don't know or are unwilling to accept. But that's what happened.
And also, along with this question, isn't it a fact that NATO armed and trained Ukraine to the standards of NATO quality, and that NATO was like the most powerful? I mean, Ukraine was the most powerful armed forces in Europe outside of outside of the alliance with America, and Russia is just beating the brakes off of Ukraine and the entire Western alliance. And that goes to this question that Mediu. And listen, we'll have one more question for him. And I know he's busy here. He didn't say anything, but I want to be respectful for the time that he gives us. So Meg says, did NATO officers die in a recent attack on the underground command center? Has it been confirmed?
Yeah, not to my knowledge. I think the attack may have taken place, but initially it was described as 200 NATO officers, generals were killed. I've been checking with my friends who are in military intelligence and the intelligence community, and nobody's heard anything about that. That tells me it's not true, because that's not the kind of thing you can keep quiet. There are too many families that would have to be notified, and the United States government does not have that full control yet over social media to keep grieving relatives from posting stories about my son, my father, my husband, whatever, was killed in Ukraine. There's a bit, I think, of psychological operation in that. I'm sure they hit an underground facility, but as far as the actual casualties, I've not seen anything else to confirm it. But I know that story keeps making the rounds, but I don't think there's any substance to it.
The last question goes to Reef Omar. And let's see if we can highlight it. It seems like my mouse froze for a second. Okay. Hopefully will it highlight. Let's see. Come on. All right, here we are. When the dollar goes out as the world's reserve currency, what happens to the U.S. military troops stationed all around the world? What happens to those Americans living abroad?
Well, it's not going to really. The only thing the effect it will have for U.S. citizens living overseas or relying upon U.S. dollars is it probably means that they're going to be able to buy less with $100 than they could before. So the U.S. dollar would no longer be necessarily strong. It would be weakened. It could actually be devalued significantly. So let's say right now, if you go to Europe, you can buy a British pound sterling for, let's say, 75 cents. Well, that's a good advantage for you. But all of a sudden, if that British pound sterling is costing you $1.50, then you've lost a lot of value. You're going to have to spend more of your money. This is the importance of losing the dollar as the U.S. reserve currency means that in the past, the United States could finance a $31 trillion deficit by continuing to lend money, because people out there would borrow our money, they'd buy up our treasuries, start selling treasuries. And it had significant stocks in those treasuries. It started unloading them last year. That's continued. So and what you've seen is a dramatic quick uptick, with Brazil buying oil, paying for it in yuan, India doing the same, with Russia. So the transformation, the move away from the dollar is real. It's becoming increasingly significant. And what the real implication of that is inflation in the United States, because the dollar will be worth less, we'll have to pay more for imports, and we are basically an import-dependent economy now. And particularly that will be the case with respect to oil. We'll have to pay more for oil, and then those price increases ripple throughout the economy. And it means the United States is not going to be able to as easily finance its great debt by going out and convincing the rest of the world to buy up our dollars. The rest of the world starts saying, no, we don't want to be beholden to the United States. So that's what we're, Rashid, what we're living through right now is, this is a moment of history. This is one that historians, we won't be around 100 years from now to listen to them write about it, but they will look back as this is the most, this change that's taking place is as significant and consequential as the change that took place at the end of World War II, when the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the Bretton Woods Agreement were all set up to create a new financial order. We're in the process of witnessing the birth of a new financial order.
On that note, Larry, I thank you. I'm gonna try to get you back next month so that we can chop it up again on the latest news, or if something breaks out, hit me up with an email to let me know what's going on. Man, I always respect your views and your insight. Thank you so much. And the chat wanted me to tell you this. They really appreciate you, and they really love Sonar 21, and they listen to you all the time.
Well, listen, Rashid, I always like being with you, brother. You do a good job, and it's an honor to be on your show.
Thank you so much. Be blessed, be safe, and I'll talk to you.
Okay.
Oh, and I'll send you the link too shortly. I'll send you the link too. All right. So everyone, I'm really appreciative of Larry taking the time out of his schedule to join us and just to give us an insight, because we really, really needed this insight on what's actually taking place in Africa, the Middle East. You see, we talked about a lot of things. We didn't touch too much upon the Latin America right now, because we were jumping to the most intense hotspots in Africa, the Middle East, the Asia Pacific, and the Ukrainian conflict in Eastern Europe. Listen, hit the like button, please. Hit the like button so we can stay in the algorithm or get a higher position in the algorithm, and also so that YouTube can know that you like the show and you like the platform, because they're deplatforming a lot of people, okay? On that note, look, thank you so much. Join us tomorrow morning at 11:40 or 11:45, whichever one. I can't remember right now. We're going to chop up the latest geopolitical news, the latest economic news, and the latest political news on this platform, your platform for empowerment, education, and truth. I love you, but always remember that God will always love you best. Until we next speak again, stay strong, stay true, but above all things, stay righteous, because righteousness is the only thing that is going to get you out of what is coming upon America and the world at large. On that note, I also got to go out with my theme. Mama, your baby boy loves you more than life. Deuces, everyone. I love you.